What's good? It's Carson, aka If Found. I'm back again with another video breakdown. Today we're going to be looking at RAVE.2, which is a bass house heavy trap hybrid that I put out at the end of last year. This one's been requested quite a bit, so I'm excited to dive into this one. We're going to do a full video breakdown here, both on the production, mixing, and a little touch on the mastering as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's the edited version of the video. If you want to catch the full video breakdown, head over to my Patreon and you can check it out there. Without further ado, let's get into it. With the first drop, we do kind of a bass house thing, and the second drop is a heavy trap drop. I'll give you a quick preview of both of those before we jump in. Okay, and in the second drop, we have the heavy trap drop, which kind of goes a little like this. So pushing pretty heavy on both drops. This is a loud song, aggressive and really in your face. So we'll kind of go over some of the techniques I did to achieve that. So let's just we'll go chronological from start to finish and see what we have here. So we open up with basically just a preview or a little tease of the drop melody, and that's here. And this itself is just a basic serum patch. Nothing crazy. I think it's an ESW patch, Echo Soundworks. I don't know if he's still active anymore. And then I layered in this little click thing. So yeah, it gives it a little more texture. In terms of the processing, so at this time I was using a lot of this RVox, and it's basically just like an LA2A, or like an optical compressor, which helps squeeze the sound a bit, get a little more loudness out of it, and also control the dynamics. I'm not really using this much anymore. This is pretty much the only Waves plugin I ever really used anyways, but it's decent. So, and then doing some clipping going in after that. And again, everything on this, you're gonna see a ton of clipping, a ton of saturation. That's kind of was the MO for this song. And then we've got different things going on here. We've got this dub echo that kind of turns on and off. So subtle, but you can hear it gives it a little more space, as opposed to just like washing it with reverb. It gives it a little bit of space, but also something with rhythm. And there's just an OTT on it. And then we have it bandpassed. And then a little bit of saturation, and then a limiter. So nothing crazy there. And these are kind of playing off of that main piano. Got a spectral shaper. I was using this a lot around this time as well. I don't use it that much anymore, but just a nice little quick hack to get the tone of things right. Basically just taming any of the high end that comes in here. You can hear it just kind of makes it feel a little bit more expensive, a little bit more polished, as opposed to this like super kind of searing high end. So it just kind of helps control that. And you could achieve the same thing with like a Pro Q3 or dynamic EQ. Gives you a similar type of result. It's just that was less buttons. It was easier for me to dial it in at the time. These sounds themselves, I have a lot of these sounds are frozen, so we'll kind of unfreeze, and this is a pretty heavy project, so we're gonna go one by one on them. But this sound is made up of 2 M1 patches. So the top, this Dream Night preset, and then I've got this Piano Mix 1. I've got this kind of Valhalla vintage verb, which just kind of turns on and off to give it some space. An OTT, some EQ, which is rolling off the lows and a little bit of the mids. SPL to give it some transients. Just makes it a little bit more aggressive. I want it to kind of be pretty stabby. Fresh air, just boosting the highs. An exciter. And I have this rack I call hyper compress. I think it's just a couple OTs. Actually, it's like an amp. But if you take the amp and you turn the dry wet down to like 20%, so it's mostly dry, I find that it kind of feels like an even more intense version of OTT. So I would call it like my hyper compress. And then I'm just doing gain control going into and out of, so it's not pushing the amp too hard. Pro Q3, nothing crazy there going on. And then some weird EQ, but this was just to kind of make room for other stuff going on. If I were to take these out, you can hear how it's going to be pretty high heavy. And I'm kind of combating what I did with the fresh air, but I boosted the fresh air into the exciter to kind of get the exciter to have more frequencies to play with, if that makes sense. So you just get a little bit of a tone difference when you do it that way, as opposed to just like not using the fresh air and not having to do this post EQ thing. And this is just a basic Nexus sound, so I'm not really going to show you that. I don't think it's really necessary. I wanna stay here with you. So I'll show you the breakdown of this lead. This is essentially like half of the drop lead. The drop is kind of this call and response thing, and this I believe is the call. Yeah. So the call portion of the drop lead is made of mostly this. So we got a number of different layers here. Essentially, if we just kind of break it down, we've got this airy vocal lead, which is kind of like our main lead melody. We got the chords with this other little guitar synth sound that's kind of playing the same melody. And then this is what I like to call an accent note. So it's basically just hitting certain notes, almost like a pedal, but instead of doing like straight 8th or 16th notes, it's just hitting certain times so that it kind of accentuates certain hits. So there's that. That same melody as before. And then literally just a sample that's just giving it like a little bit of transient. So let's break this down a little bit more. So this isn't anything crazy. I'm pretty sure it's just a Val sample. Yeah, I'm not even using this. And then that hyper compressed rack that I told you about earlier, same thing. The spectral shaper, doing some EQing here just to get the tone right. I've got this VR delay, which is basically just like a Nexus style reverb and delay. This dub echo, which will turn on every now and then. Just kind of like a delay throw. So this kind of gives me this nice delay throw. And then I have a second echo that it turns on as well that kind of helps complete the effect. That way it kind of like bounces a little bit more. And then, yeah, just a smart clip to top it off. So nothing crazy there. This is the big stack. Quick before we get into the chord stack. There's that lead sound I was telling you about. So our two main stack leads. And what I like to do for stacks, you can see there's a million different ways to do these, but the core principle is pretty much the same. You want to have your basic super saw, so like something that's really high energy, probably pretty wide as well. Then you want to have some type of like mid layer usually, but I'm using the lead as the mid layer here, so I'm not really using a mid layer on this stack. And then you want to have some kind of unique layer. So think saw, like a bed layer, which is like your saw wide layer, and then a mid layer, which is something usually really simple, but that just kind of keeps the presence of the stack. And then your unique layer, which then takes and adds your own character into a supercell stack, so it sounds like yours. So this, to me, for this stack, this is the unique layer. So it's like this bit crushed, weird, distorted sounding, like almost like pitch wobble sounding thing. But the sound itself, I believe, yeah, this is an ivory patch. I don't know if I made many changes to it. This is a while ago. But it's got a nice kind of detuned pitch wobble to it that I really like. So that's kind of why I chose this one as the unique layer. And then you see that same hyper compressed rack. I use this a lot around this time. I've got it's like a little mini fat rack, an EQ, which is kind of reeling it in. That the main big, like the bed layer is what I like to call it, or the saw layer, is got all the highs. So I'm carving the highs out of this one, so we don't need it. And then I wanted a lot of like stabbiness to it. If I were to take this out, so it just gives it a little bit of an attack there. So it just kind of, again, the vibe of this song is very like aggressive, punchy, and like in your face. So I kind of wanted to keep that with these sounds. A little bit of EQ, again, to some cleanup EQ here. Additionally, a saturator, just driving a little harder. And then additional saturation, and then essentially a little bit of OTT. I don't know if there's much, yeah, a little bit more cleanup EQ as well, and taking off those highs. Pretty much that. And then we have the main saw layer. Look at this. So this is a silent patch. Almost every single time I do one of these saw layers, that's what I'm doing, is a silent patch. I just think the saws sound really good. That being said, Serum 2 saws do sound really good as well. I haven't done a direct comparison to silent yet, so I don't know if I still prefer the silent saws yet. We'll see. I'll have to sit down and look at that, but maybe I'll do a video where it compares. But patch itself is just an Armin 2 patch. Or Armin Van Buren patch, old patch. It's like from like 2008 or something, I think, but still works. I've got like this light rack, which is essentially just some OTT, some reverb. Just gives it a little bit of space, turns on and off. That hyper compress. This Heatwave plugin, which I'm not using anymore, but I just got in the Slate bundle, so I was like, oh yeah, I'll try it out. Some EQ to clean up. Wanted to bring the mids out a bit more. You know, it just kind of focuses the sound. And then I've got this Pro Q3, which is doing a little bit of low end taming. Just taming that fundamental, because I do have this down here as well. So kind of making some room for that, for the harmonics on that sound. Giving it a little bit more saturation. You'll see a common theme with this song is a lot of saturation, just tons of saturation in this song. So, and then some auto pan. This is like a little flutter sound, so you'll see like right here. And that's how I do that little build-up effect that ends up coming. We'll look deeper at that at the back half of the video when I get to that part of the song, but yeah, I'm essentially achieving it with like an auto pan. And our effects. The effects are really important though, because they help, again, kind of give it space and give it like a little bit more unique character. So this was, I had to bounce these effects. I bounced them a long time ago. It's essentially like an effects stem. I had probably 40 tracks of effects just in this effects folder, and I bounced the I basically did like a sub mix of the effects, and then used the stems in the final song. It was just too many there's just too many tracks. You can see like without those additional tracks, I'm already at 148. I think with all my effects tracks, I was at like 220 or something. It was a lot. So I basically did like a submix, and it's just got this little LFO effect on here, just giving some pulsating. And then it was the bass effect, or bass sound was like just some vocal sample from Splice that I did some modification to, but it's nothing crazy. And then same idea for this wobble effects. And that's just like a horn, I think it was a cashmere horn or something. I'm just filtering it up. This part here, we'll talk about a little bit in a little bit. And then for this part, I think the most important part of the effects of this section is this mega shout sax, which is essentially just like 4 or 5 different shout samples that I pitched and tuned to create this kind of like fundamental and perfect fifth stack, which just kind of gives it a lot of like a nice like hype hit. And sounds really good with the chords. So like if I were to just solo this versus, so you can hear how it just kind of, that impact really gives it a nice sound, and it's essentially just a tonal impact, and you can build them super easily. I like to use shouts, but you can use like total and percussion hits, which is a bunch of reverb and OTT to kind of bring out all of the harmonics. Or you could use, vocal chops. You could use instrument hits, one shots, whatever. I mean, the list is endless. You can build these things in so many ways, and they just sound so much cooler to me than just a normal like impact sample, which is usually just percussion and noise. So achieves the same type of thing, but is more tonal, sounds more melodic, and it catches your ear more, in my opinion. So that's something I've been doing a lot. For the past year or 2 years or so. Got this little background effects here, kind of bouncing around. So let's look at the drums. And here with the drums on this section, just a basic clap. I think on the intro section here, it's literally just a loop. This is something I use in the drop, but nothing crazy. And then this little part here, some basic claps. And then for the kind of the intro vocals, okay, so the vocals on this song were interesting. They were a combination of like 3 or 4 different splice loops, I think, and then I also recorded some vocals. I did some AI like manipulation of those vocals. It was a mess, and the vocals themselves took months, to be honest. Like, and it wasn't like months of continuous work, but it was like, 2 days, this 1 month working on this and adding this idea, and then sitting on it for a couple months, coming back to it, and then be like, oh, it'd be cool to add this. I was trying everything in my power not to have to use a traditional vocalist on this, and just to like try to keep it like as me as possible. And so it's a combination, like I said, of these are like AI vocals. It's actually my voice that I then used AI manipulation to kind of change the tone of, and then bounced it back in, did some processing, and called it there. So this is the stack on that. We've got this meta tune, which is essentially just a tuner, like auto tune. Little micro shift to give it some chorus. Just gives a little bit of chorus so it feels bigger. These type of little effects are really important on vocals, in my opinion. They're kind of what make it sound professional, as opposed to just a dry vocal chilling in your track. And then the mix is actually done in the virtual mix rack. I don't really use this much anymore, but like I said, I just got the Slate bundle, so this was the basic vocals 2 preset, which gives me this preamp like EQ type setup here, and no compressor, and then a harmonic saturator or exciter.
Here with you.
If I take it off, it sounds like this.
Here with you. Here with you.
It's not like a huge night and day difference, but it does a little bit of something.
Close to you.
And then I had a couple different splice loops here.
I wanna stay.
So we've got that.
I wanna stay.
So just a couple, just like a stack there that kind of comes in and out. And then all together it would be like,
I wanna stay. Here with you.
we've got an additional reverb throw.
I wanna stay. Here with you.
Just to give it a little bit of a bigger feel there at that hit. And then a shout. Just additional shout. So it's all about like layering, but layering intentionally, like, or with intent. And then this is where the vocal kind of start teasing the verse vocals here, which come in like this.
Everything that you do makes me feel alive.
Or I guess you want to look at it as a chorus. Maybe it's the chorus vocals. This is another splice loop separate from before.
Everything that you do makes me feel alive.
Essentially just got a soothe on it, which has helped cleaning it up. I'm doing this SSL native, which is like a built-in vocal chain. Super simple though, just some compression, a little bit of D. I don't even, actually none of this is even turned on. I'm just using the EQ. So really very simple.
Everything that you
Pre-mixed
do.
already coming out of Splice, right? Then, let's hear how this part sounds.
Everything that you do makes me feel alive. Lay it all on me. All the way that you move, lay you around the night. Lay it
Okay,
all.
so what's going on here is super simple. Like basically just like a nice little break after this big, hands up anthemic section, just to kind of give a little cool down before the build kicks in. And what I'm doing here, which is kind of super subtle but also interesting, in my opinion, is these little kick hits and kind of bouncing off of the vocal and letting the instrumental support the vocal, but more so the vocal rhythm, right? So you've got this.
Everything that you
Hold on, let me get the vocal soloed here.
Everything that you do makes me feel alive.
All right, so I could move this kick if I wanted to really accentuate, like kind of mirror the vocal rhythm. I could have it more like
Makes me feel alive. Feel alive.
kind of right there, right?
That you do makes me feel alive.
Kind of have maybe all these hits
Makes me feel alive.
like that. And I believe that was actually originally how I had it, but I wanted to let that feel breathe so it didn't have anything it was competing with. But so in the way I'm able to get that kind of like rhythm accentuation at the same time is instead of just, having that there, I take that first hit off and you kind of like, your brain kind of fills it in. So,
Makes me feel alive.
and I just bring in this kick to kind of help accentuate the rest of it. Is that, I don't know if
Makes
that
me
makes
feel
sense, but
alive. Lay it all on me. All the way that you move,
And then-
lay you around the night. Lay it all.
yeah, just doing these little throws like we were doing before. So the same throws. You can see I'm doing a lot of these shout stacks.
Makes me feel alive. Lay it all on me. All the way that you move, lay you around the night.
So again, letting the vocal have its moment, and those gaps between the vocal where she's not really singing, bringing in the lead to kind of like do a response to that. So everything feels kind of cohesive and it's like bouncing off each other. And then we break it to the build.
Lay it all on me.
So this build here, this goes into the bass house drop, which is the first drop, right? And I wanted the build to be very simple, like just a 909 snare that builds up. something like nothing really over the top or crazy. And part of that is because I know I'm going to do a fake out on this first drop. So I don't want to like go too intense on that build and then not have the payoff. So instead we'll kind of let the build do its normal thing and not like go crazy on it. And then we have this additional fake out, which is like an extended build almost. So listening through. Yeah, before we get into the drop, let's look at this little fake out, or the vocal chop here. So super simple. I knew I wanted the rhythm to just be a bunch of like eighth notes, so I just chopped up the region into a bunch of eighth note regions. And then what's nice is you can literally just go through and select the sample type, the part of the sample you want. So right, if I wanted to just do something new real quick, which is a really nice way to do vocal chops in my opinion. Especially if you know what the rhythm you want is, you just take a full file like this. I just had the full thing, which is like a different vocal sample from Splice. There's like 5 of them in here. So yeah, looking at the drop, the structure here, originally there was no fake out. It was just this basic 2-bar structure. So 2-bar call, 2-bar response, 2-bar call, 2-bar response. And that was pretty much it. And then that's normally how I'll build my drops too. I build them super simple. I'll have like a very basic structure in there, get the drop kind of vibe and feeling good. And then we'll go back through and be like, okay, let's add a fill here, let's add a fake drop here, let's do this and that. And that kind of helps keep the listener engaged and makes your arrangement more interesting. Looking at our house drums here. Let's get everything. There we go. So we got our drop drums. Okay, so the core loop is essentially this, which is just a garage loop that I had programmed out like 2-3 years ago, I think, and I've just used it a bunch. There's a lot of IDs I'm sitting on that still use this loop, and I kind of scrapped a lot of them, but this is the one that made it to the final actual song. But essentially, it's a pretty basic garage beat. And we got this drum, one of my own built kicks, got like a house kick, and then a little bit of a transient from this one. Get a little bit of like high frequency on the transient, and then these loops are just kind of filling everything else. So there's like our shakers and stuff like that. There's really no processing, I don't think, on like any of these. And then I group them up and just kind of control some of the muddy frequencies. But all together, we get something like this. So this is the one that I spent, most time is getting this right, this groove. These grooves are very interesting to kind of get right because they're not quite on grid, as you can see. I mean, this one kind of is, but you can see there's a little bit of swing on that one. So getting that right and just getting the right feel for it takes some time. And then I've got this little, which is literally just me in my phone. It's like just doing that. And then just chopping it up and doing some sampling. That's pretty much all that is. We got these little fills, kind of like a fill there. And that's pretty much it for the drops, or for the drop drums. Got this big clap, kind of acts as like a noisy cymbal almost. That 909 kind of comes in as like a fill here.
Everybody put them up now.
open up. So this is probably not how I would do it if I had to do it again, but I have 2 909 hats. I have this one in this loop, which actually maybe I don't. Maybe I just have the one. Okay, so I did do this the right way. So and this is where the 909 hat is coming in. So just a techno 909 hat, getting the tone right. Little decap. This is something I saw. I think I saw John Summit do this. I thought it was like interesting. It's a great way to just kind of fatten up your hats. Just kind of really sends it, which is kind of cool. Makes it feel a little bit more in your face. And then I have this additional loop that comes in here, which is kind of like doing a similar rhythm as this, right? I'm just accentuating it. So it's just kind of like that little perk hit. It's essentially just like accentuating that. And then those same loops. And then all together. So like, and for this one I was really experimenting with kind of placing kicks where you wouldn't expect them. So like I had this super lagged, like this dragging kick here, which is not something that really makes sense here, but it just kind of felt cool to do. So I was like, fuck it, I'll do it. And then I have obviously the sidechain is everything to the kick. So sidechain will kind of mirror this, but versus, right? Like that's the expected kick, but I was like, you know what, let me try just kind of having a drag. The leads that we have here, and like I said, call and response. So we've got, oh my bad, there we go. Cool. So the response is going to be with this vocal, which we'll look at as essentially a vocal chop, which we are previewing in the build. The drop leads for the call. So these we already went over. It's the same as what was in this like anthemic part. I actually just stripped back a couple layers. Actually, I didn't strip them back, but essentially the same thing. Nothing really changed here. Just like a little bit of mild difference in automation. So those who have access to the actual project file can dig deeper into this and see exactly what I was doing. But it's essentially the same. There's nothing crazy going on there. Okay. What is new is this little fill. So I have these kind of hits. And this is, let's see what this is. We've got this hit, which is a samplifier patch. And then I'm just doing some compression to really bring it out. And then I have this EQ, which is taming it back. So it's essentially like an OTT on crack, more or less. And that's pretty much it. And then throwing it into a saturator, just to kind of like really pull the tail up some more. And then just this like hyper pop-ish sound effect that comes in. But all together, kind of has this little. Kind of an interesting. I always like to do these little one-shot fills on the top of the drop, or like every 4 bar or every 1 or like 2 bars or so. Just things that kind of like catch your ear and keep the listener engaged, and also make the transitions a little more interesting as we're transitioning into the response section here. So this lead is the same as, you know, what was in the first part of the song, but then I have this little alternate thing that comes in here. Pretty much that. Literally just kind of changed up the notes here, but the bass notes are the same. They're just following the overall progression, which I believe is a 4-5-6. Let's look at it real quick. Not. Alright, so it's not 4-5-6, but it's kind of similar. Actually, it is a 4-5-6. I'm sorry. So here's the 6, here's the 4, the 5, and then the 6. And I'm talking about scale degrees.